Hi, thanks so much for joining our Navigating Motherhood video this week. My name is Stephanie Schwartz. I'm the Director of Women's Ministry at Compass Bible Church, and I have two very special friends here with me today, Natalie Winter and Kjeell. And Natalie and Kate are here to help me talk about the topic of time management. So before we talk about time management, let's hear from Natalie and Kate and find out a little bit more about who they are. Natalie, do you want to begin? Who are you? And what's any connection that you might have to navigating motherhood?
So my name's Natalie Winter, as Stephanie said, and I have a kindergartner and a first grader. And I served in Navigating Motherhood for several years as a table leader. I also taught in Navigating Motherhood, and my mom has served for several years as a mentor mom in Navigating Motherhood.
Yes, so you guys have a long connection to the Navigating Motherhood ministry.
We love Navigating Motherhood.
Thank you. And Kate, introduce yourself and tell us as well what your connection to Navigating Motherhood is.
I'm Kjeell. I've been married for 28 years and have two college-age students. And I was in a similar group to Navigating Motherhood a few years back and loved it, served in a leadership position. And then as my kids got older, they kicked me out. But luckily, Navigating Motherhood has allowed me to come back as a teacher from time to time.
Yes, and both Natalie and Kate do a great job teaching in our Navigating Motherhood ministry, so thank you for doing that. And you're both really good at time management. And so that's why I brought them here to talk about time management. I want to begin just by reading an interesting passage from the Old Testament. It's actually from the book of Psalms. The Psalms are typically written by King David, but this psalm was actually written by Moses. I'm sure you've heard of Moses before. He wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. He was the one who God gave the 10 Commandments to, and he wrote Psalm 90, and in Psalm 90, verse 12, he prays, in a sense, teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. So in the beginning of Psalm 90 there, Moses is kind of going through just some practical truth about how fragile life is, how our days here on this planet are short. And it's kind of, appropriate for us to be thinking about that right now with all of these virus issues. I mean, we've probably all had an opportunity to sit down and think about the fact that, our lives are really fragile and our time here on this planet is short. And so Moses, in his great wisdom, prays in response, God, teach us then to number our days, to be wise with our days, to be wise with our time, so that our heart would be wise. This time goes by so fast, and we need to make sure that we're making the right decisions regarding what we do with the short lives that we're given. It's interesting because we all have been given the same 24 hours a day. And I know when I look around at others, I think, wow, how do they get so much done in those 24 hours? I know Natalie gets so much done and Kate gets so much done. And there's times I think if I could manage my time better, maybe I'd be as successful as they are. So let me begin by asking them, both very hardworking women, what a typical day looks like for them. Let me begin with you, Natalie.
So I am a college professor, as well as I mentioned, a mom and a wife. And so on a typical day during the school year, I get up early and try to do my Bible study and pray, hopefully exercise, and then I'm off. I work in Riverside, so I have to give myself some time to get up there.
How long does that normally take you?
Usually about 50 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's about 2 hours a day just driving.
Just driving.
Wow.
Yes. But I try to redeem that time.
That's fantastic.
Use it well. Listen to a lot of audiobooks. And so then I'm teaching most of the day. And then I pick my kids up from school, and then it's doing their stuff, doing, soccer or ballet, getting ready for dinner, and then we start the cycle all over again.
Yes. And you're a great wife. You invest a lot into your husband, and you serve here at church. I mean, you're very aggressive in your service, which is so great. You take advantage of every opportunity to build into the people here. So that's amazing to see. And what about you, Kate?
Well, I have always worked outside the home also throughout raising my kids. And so when they were young, it definitely felt like I was wearing a lot of hats and juggling them, sometimes not to the most efficient way. So both as a mother and a wife and a daughter and a friend and just trying to meet all of those needs. Now that my kids are out of the nest, it's a little bit of a different season, but yet I'm also finding that they, as college students, need me more now, and the issues are weightier.
Right.
So there's really no rhythm to my day anymore. I started my own business a year ago, so that has become really exciting and interesting and took a lot of time and energy to get started. And then serving here is so important.
Right.
So I've also done that and also served in their schools. So there's always been lots of activity, lots of competing priorities, and always trying to figure out, what's the best thing to do.
Yeah, that's so good. And you too, Kate, you're a great wife to your husband, like Natalie, and you serve here ambitiously at church, and we appreciate that. I like the fact that you said that even though your kids are college age, they still need your time. So, I think sometimes when our kids are young, we think, this is going to pass, and then I'm going to have all this time. And it's not true. We need to tackle time management now because it's always going to be a challenge. So no matter what season we're in, we're going to need to deal with time management. So let me ask you, let me begin with you, Kate. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced or that, have come across your path when it comes to just being good at time management?
One of the challenges I struggle with, even to this day, is getting up and starting running hard without having a moment of reflection and being planful about what I want the day to accomplish. That I tend to let the urgent activities drive my time management rather than the important. And that's sometimes an interesting balance that, oftentimes the urgent and the important can be the same thing. I've got a sick child, I need to take that child to the doctor's, fine. But oftentimes the urgent trumps the important. The important isn't in your face screaming at you, do me, do me, do me. Well, the urgent is, and oftentimes isn't as valuable. So as an example of that, in the morning, I have that huge temptation to check my email, check my phone, right? And if I go to that before I spend time with God and in prayer and reading the Bible, then my day becomes reactive. And I'm out ahead of God and I'm rushing around and I'm responding to all of these things. And in the end of the day, do you really need to respond to that text right away? Do you really need to do that email right now? Or could you really focus on what's important, but perhaps not so urgent?
So would you say that spending time in your Bible or prayer is important or urgent?
It is very important.
Okay.
It doesn't feel urgent in the beginning, but as the more you do it and the more you see how that shapes your day, the more urgent it becomes to you because you realize that when you're out ahead of God, it's not a good place to be.
So you're saying that we need to focus on what's important rather than the things that are maybe urgently trying to get our attention?
Absolutely. And technology, we all know now, is designed to suck our attention.
Yeah.
And that's not, it may start to feel like it's urgent, but it's really not.
Right.
And it's certainly not important.
Yeah. No, that's super good. I've definitely been there. And I know the experience of waking up and just sitting behind that phone screen. So, yes. What about you, Natalie?
So it's interesting because we chatted about try to think of some examples. And then, of course, this morning, I had a great example of time management challenges. my house right now, it's a little bit like hot potato because my kids are doing remote learning and my
Yes.
husband and I are both working and we don't have computers for everyone in the house.
Right.
And so we have to shuffle who's doing computer work and who's not. And my husband and I have meetings where we have to be present. And so trying to make sure everyone can get the space that they need. And this morning we had a meeting pop up and I was trying to get here and I was like, I have to get this done. I have to keep my son doing his schoolwork. And as I was thinking about, well, how could I have managed this better? I thought, the problem is sometimes I'm too task oriented and I don't stop and ask myself, is this really urgent and important?
Right.
I could have very easily have told my son, okay, take a break. When mom gets back, we'll do your schoolwork. But I just wanted to like press on ahead, which ended up creating what felt like a crunch on my time rather than using my time wisely.
Yeah.
The other thing I am challenged with is sometimes I take on responsibility that's not mine to take on. And that makes it difficult to manage my time. I want someone needs help, which is a good thing to help people, but sometimes I just say yes without thinking about what I'm committing to.
Right.
And then I take on that burden onto myself and I end up feeling like my time has been taken over with other things rather than the things that are important and are a priority to me.
Right. Oh, that's really good. So let me ask you, if somebody is in a position and they're listening and they're thinking that they've taken on something that they probably shouldn't have taken on, do you say that you could prayerfully bow out? Or, I think that we tend to feel really guilty if we raised our hand and said, yes, we'll do this. We feel like, it's wrong to say, you know what, I don't think that decision was made in wisdom and I think I need to bow out. Do you think that's acceptable or what would you suggest?
Absolutely. I think it's acceptable. I think you have to think about, it wouldn't be good to bow out if it's due in the next 20 minutes. That's probably not a good time to bow out. But I think it's important to communicate and to be honest. I think a lot of times, maybe especially as women, I find we don't want to admit that we've taken on too much.
Yeah.
And so we just keep going ahead and run ourselves ragged, trying to get everything we think we have to get done, even if we don't really have to get it done. And so I think it's perfectly acceptable to just be honest, say, hey, I've taken on more than I can. Or another thing that I like to ask, if someone gives me a task and they're expecting it of me and I don't feel like it's something I can do right now, I start to feel pressure.
Yes.
If it's like my boss or my husband, maybe I'll say, okay, here's what I have going on. What would you like me not to do?
Oh, that's a good one.
Because I can't do this and all these other things. So tell me, and then they're helping me solve my time management crunch.
Yeah, that's a good one. Absolutely. Well, let me ask you both then, and Natalie, I'll start with you. What are then some practical tips that you would give to our friends? I mean, I think we all can say that we'd like to get better at time management. I think even as being people who are considerate of time management, we'd still like to get better in our time management.
100%.
So, what are some tips that you would share with our friends? You have young kids at home. You do a lot, a college professor, great wife, great mom, serve here at church. What are some tips that you could give to our friends regarding time management?
Great question. So I think for me, one of the first things that I really try to do is I always try to think about what is it that I'm aiming for? What is the goal that I'm working towards? Some people say begin with the end in mind. It's a popular phrase. And I think that's really helpful to say, okay, well, when it comes to my kids, what is it that I'm working towards? And those are the things that I'm going to prioritize. I don't care if my kid is a great soccer player. I'd like him to be a really great teammate, though. So I'm going to prioritize that rather than other things that I might prioritize. And so begin with the end in mind, I think is really helpful. Keep that goal. Don't think about what you have to do today. Think about what you want to achieve in terms of your child's character development, in terms of your own personal development, in terms of the impact that you have. Think about what it is that you want to achieve and then prioritize. Those are the things that are most important.
Right.
Should hopefully be what's most important.
So would you write those down or do you just make mental note of that or how do you do that?
I have written it down before. I'm not not a great like resolution person personally.
Right.
And so, but I kind of just keep it in the back of my head. And I also, when I feel like I'm in that crunch of, I've taken on too much or I don't have enough time, I'll ask myself the question, like, what is it you're trying to achieve?
Right.
And then set aside those other things. Sometimes that might mean saying, hey, I'm sorry, I've taken on too much, but set aside the things that aren't part of that end goal, the most important end goals for me and my family.
Right. Now, you said, as far as like the end goal with the soccer, for example, is that your child becomes a good teammate, which makes sense to me. But what if someone's listening and they say, well, I don't really care if they're a good teammate. I want them to be a professional soccer player. How would you respond? Because, that's a lot of times people do want their kids to be professional athletes. They make a lot of money and, they get college scholarships and, they get fame and...
So again, I go back to, okay, well, ultimately, what is it that you want for your kid? And maybe it is that you really just want a famous kid, but most people, that's not their end goal for their kid.
Right.
And that's not to say if your kid is a great soccer player that they can't pursue soccer and they can't, but I'm just saying, think about when your kid, it sounds super morbid, but when your kid, it comes to the end of their life.
Right.
And someone's talking about them.
Yeah.
What do you want them to be saying? Do you want them to only be saying they were a really good soccer player?
Right.
Or do you want them to be talking about their character and how generous they were and things like that? So I think we oftentimes put our secondary goals, which might be, hey, I want my kid to be a good soccer player, in primary place.
Right.
And we need to really question that.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. And that kind of ties in with Kate's, important and urgent. The important would be the character. And, kind of the urgent would be more like, let's get really good at this sport. But that, primary goal or that important goal, I think that's kind of a common theme that we have here is focusing on what's really important. So that's great. Yeah.
Another tip that's worked really well for me is to use very specific tools. And people, will say it differently, but I find that if I'm really good at keeping my calendar and I'm really good at keeping a to-do list and I'm really good at having a place to store information, if I have those 3 tools and I'm diligent about using them, that helps. And I don't put calendar stuff on my to-do list and I don't put to-do list stuff on my calendar, and I try to keep everything has a place and everything goes with like things.
Okay, how do you differentiate between calendar and to-do list? Because to me, it sounds like the same thing.
So calendar is where I have to be physically present or virtually present, as the case may be. If my presence is expected virtually.
Zoom meetings, right?
Zoom meetings, Or because I keep the calendar for my family or my family. So right now, our calendar is filled with lots of Zoom meetings for my children as they're doing remote school. So calendar is where we are physically expected to be. To-dos are tasks that I want to accomplish.
Okay.
So I try to make sure, and I often put due dates on my to-dos, but I don't necessarily calendar them unless I need dedicated time to work on it. And then that's where I'm physically supposed to be. I'm physically supposed to be in my office working on that project. And so then I will calendar time to work on this writing project, time for grading, and put that on my calendar to protect that time.
Okay, so go to Target to pick up a prescription would be a to-do.
Yes, but if I need to set aside time to do that, then it goes on my calendar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. And then do you have any specific tools that you recommend for that?
So you ask 3 different people, you'll get 3 different opinions.
Totally.
So I get no money for these recommendations. So I use Google Calendar because it works for across platforms.
Yes.
So I can put my school calendar on it, my family's calendar, my small group's calendar, everything can go on it. I use Microsoft To Do for my to-do list, which is great because you can also take a project, take a to-do and break it down. So if you have one to-do, then you can put in like the next step and then the next step, and it'll automatically pop up when you finish the first one.
Nice.
And then for keeping information, I use Evernote.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my data repository, whether it's articles or writing ideas that I have, I keep it all in Evernote.
Right. Oh, that's great. Wow, thank you. I mean, those are helpful and helpful tools, helpful things to think through. Anything else that you have for us?
I think maybe related to what Kate was saying is just put first things first, right? I try to do the most important things first. So when I'm grading, sounds weird, but when I'm grading, I grade the most important papers first because that has the biggest impact on students' grades and they're often the longest papers.
Yes.
But it also has to do with how I organize my day, right? So right now we do schoolwork for the kids in the morning because that's one of the most important things that we do is that we get the schoolwork done. We don't play first and then go do schoolwork.
Right.
And then I also think another helpful thing is just to remember tomorrow's a new day. I think a lot of times I am tempted to carry like, oh, I didn't get all that done yesterday.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you have another fresh 24 hours tomorrow.
Right.
And if you've put first things first, you've gotten the most important things done.
Right.
And so then when you approach the new day, you can give yourself a lot of grace and again, focus on what's most important. And if it's not most important, it's probably not that big a deal that you didn't get it done.
Right. Yeah. That's great. What would you say to somebody who's habitually not getting it all done? I mean, you've got this list, you've got this agenda for your day, and it's, 90% of the time you're not getting it all done.
I would say you're probably a very optimistic person, that you think you can do more in the time than you really can. So I think one of the things we have to do is be honest with ourselves.
Right.
I wanted to plant a garden the other day and I thought like, oh, I can do that really quick. No, I have to dig things up. My kids wanted to be involved. And when your kids are involved, it takes longer anyways.
Yes.
And so be honest about with yourself about how long it takes and to make sure that you don't have things on that list that you really don't need to do.
Right.
There might be things that you think are nice, but may not be important.
Right.
And to ask for help. I think one of the things, at least for me, I'm often tempted to think I have to do it all.
Right.
And I don't. When we throw birthday parties, my husband's super creative. And I know a lot of times it's the wife that's super creative, but that's not the dynamics in my household. So my husband does a ton, like he's a great artist. So he draws things for the kids to decorate the house.
Wow.
Which would take me an agonizing amount of time to do. But for him, he loves it.
Yeah.
And it's a way for him to be a part of that. And I don't take on the burden then of feeling like I have to do everything for this birthday party.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And I'm sure we could even ask friends and neighbors and, siblings and grandparents and get everybody involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's super wise. Well, what about you, Kate? I mean, when it comes to just suggestions for time management, I know you mentioned your kids are college age now.
Right.
I mean, and you obviously remember the days that they were at home and young. What would you give as far as tips or advice to our friends regarding these things?
Sure. Well, I think there's always the temptation to say, well, if I just get that tool or that tip, I need that secret app that's going to just revolutionize my time management skills.
Yes.
And, as we're all saying, that's really not the crux of the issue. Certainly there are great tools, there are great apps. I love the online calendar. That's been a game changer for me as that started to come, into vogue when my kids were young. I immediately jumped on that. We had a family calendar. Everything got calendared. My husband was getting invites left and right from me. What are these things? But that certainly is helpful. The to-do list is really, really important. Just not leaving anything, in your head, by memory. Everything needs to be written down, captured. Otherwise, for me, if it's something that I'm just going to remember, it's gone.
Right.
So that's, certainly kind of a fundamental, that's sort of level 1 time management. But what I have found, and particularly now that my kids are older and looking back, is really that time management is about putting first things first, like Natalie said, setting your priorities.
Right.
And sometimes we feel like we need to shoulder that whole burden as moms and trying to do everything, but yet there is so many resources that we have and input that we can get to help us set our priorities. God's word, first and foremost, is a great source for trying to figure out what's really important, what do I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And then turning to our husbands. I had a friend that in the days when we were all harried, our kids were young, she was just pulling her hair out because she really felt like she had to keep her home at a certain standard of cleanliness.
Yes.
because that's what her husband wanted. And then one day she sat down with him and she said, what's really important to you that I can do during the day that will make your life easier? And he said, I don't really care if the house is that clean.
Oh, wow.
But I'd really love to have dinner ready when I came home and have you be able to sit with me and eat dinner.
Wow.
And she was like,
Shocked.
and so I think that is a real learning that I have seen over the years about, trying to do it all versus just trying to figure out what's important and then focus on that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I appreciate that. I think, as we even think of the verse that we read, the Psalm 90:12, the teaching us to number our days so that we would get that wise heart. That wise heart, clearly from these two wise women, would be a heart that puts the important things first,
Right.
In our mind, in our goals, and even in our day, getting the important things done first. And I think that's a challenge for all of us. We tend to put the important things off for later,
Right.
and then those become the things that don't get done.
Yeah.
Anything else, Kate?
Well, I think looking back to now, what would I have done differently as I'm, raising my kids? I feel like I perhaps could have been more intentional with how I spent my time, and that concept of intentionality about what do I really want for my kids. And so similar to what Natalie said, I really think now, what was the most important thing? And in the moment, a lot of times the sort of extracurricular activities and the sports and the lessons, those become the drivers. And when you sit back and say, what do I really care about? Statistically, there are very few professional soccer players. I think we can just be honest. We'd all love our kid, maybe, or think we'd love our kid to be that, 0.1%. But what we do care about is that our kids are kind, that they're good critical thinkers, right? So maybe chess club is an important thing, that they know God. Are you spending time teaching your kids about God?
Right.
That they, care for others. The things that perhaps, when you look at them now, you think, well, wow, that was really, that was maybe not lining up with where my time was. So there's an opportunity to do kind of a time audit, if you will, to look at, where is my time going? It's kind of an aha. And now there's great tools, technology to be able to help us see where does our time go. You can go on your iPhone and under the battery setting, you can see what percentage of time are you spending in different apps. I mean, that's kind of an aha. If you're seeing those social media apps are popping up there pretty high. You can use an app like Rescue Time. Or you can just yourself go through your calendar and look at, where is this time going?
What's Rescue Time? I've never heard of that.
Rescue Time is an app that you can put together where you can actually put in what your goals and objectives are, and then you can look at your calendar and it can help show you where your time sinks are. And what's sucking your time and where you need to maybe find pockets of time that you can repurpose, reallocate, right?
Wow.
For things that are more valuable.
That sounds good.
So it's just, I think it's important to look at our calendars. And then I know I was often, like Natalie said, the optimistic mom that thought I could do more. And I still even find that I schedule things back to back. And I never leave myself that buffer, that, cushion of white space for the extra traffic on the freeway, for, the kid that all of a sudden, can't find their lunchbox. And so it makes for a hairy day. So in hindsight, I would build in more white space, more buffers into my schedule. And then it allows for those teachable moments, for those organic moments when you have that opportunity and that time to be with your child and to impart some of those life lessons that you really want them to have and to carry with them.
Yeah, that's super good. You mentioned the friend who, wanted to keep the house clean for her husband and had that great conversation with her husband and found out that he wanted her to just sit down and eat dinner with him.
Right.
What would you say to the woman who's listening that says, yeah, but I don't care if he doesn't want the house clean. I want the house clean. I mean, what do we do when it comes to time management or looking at our schedules if maybe our husband's desire for our time is different than our desire?
Right? Well, so those are competing priorities, right? I have my desires and my husband has his desires. And in a perfect world, they line up. But most often they do not. So, we need to understand that as wives and moms, our role is to support our husbands and to be a helpmate. And the way we can best do that is to let his priorities become our priorities. Now, if we can do both, great. If I can keep my house beautifully and I feel happy and I can make dinner and I'm not making myself crazy, then that's great. But I think we really need to understand that at this time and where we are right now, that our role as wives and moms, as you've heard here, is to be a helpmate to our husband. Right. So it's his priorities that become ours.
That's good. That sounds risky, though. I mean, and let me just ask you from personal experience.
Right.
Have you ever made your husband's priority your priority? And do you feel like you got cheated as a result?
Well, assuming that both people are really looking to God's word to set their priorities, which is, always in our conversations that we don't want to make our priority something that God doesn't see as a priority.
Right.
But there is a temptation to feel like I'm in the back seat, that my husband's priorities, he's driving the bus and I'm just in the back seat. I think we need to step out of that because that is sort of a self-focused approach where we're just thinking about ourselves and our needs, and that's not a good place to be for living life in general.
Right.
And so, when there's certainly that temptation to feel like, hey, I've been totally cheated, I've been robbed, like nobody cares about me. I think as moms, right? Don't we kind of feel like that? Nobody cares about what I want. What about what I want? Well, Mother's Day's coming up, right? Maybe we have one day where we get what we want.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a reality, and I think we have to acknowledge it and recognize it, and then to say, that's not the kind of person I want to be. I don't want to be all about myself and my agenda. I want to be about other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super good. Yeah, well, so much to think about. Let me ask you guys if you have one last statement that you could give to our friends, just concerning time management and, maybe, being wise about their days. What would you say in closing?
So mine would be to remember there's nothing that you can do to get more time. I think we always think that we can.
Yes.
There is nothing that we can do.
Yes. Why is that we think that?
So use the time that you have well,
because
there's nothing you can do to get more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what about you, Kate?
I would say don't sweat the small stuff. Looking back now, I got balled up over a lot of really small things. I said minutia. My daughter was like, what's that? Things that don't really matter. So much to like what Natalie and Stephanie said, just focus on what really matters and just let the rest go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time out of your schedules to, do this with me and to talk to our friends about time management. I just pray that we all, would continually pray that prayer of Moses, that we would ask God to teach us to number our days, that we would be wise concerning our time. Make sure and meet with your Zoom groups this week so that you can talk to your Navigating Motherhood group, your friends, your leaders about time management, maybe, run ideas by each other, or even hold each other accountable, as to how we can get better at, putting the most important things on our to-do list and making sure that we're doing the important things first and that we're thinking about the end rather than, just short-term goals. Also, if you're not a part of Navigating Motherhood, you can go to navigatingmotherhood.com and register for free online. There's a link there. They'll put you in a Zoom group, and you can discuss these things with other godly women who want to work these things out with you and help you to see how you can get better at time management and just, come alongside you and encourage you along the way. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you on our video next week.